From feather falls to fireballs, there's a lot of shit you can do in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So much so that it can be difficult to come to a consensus on what to do in particular situations. When is the best time to cast Otto's Irresistible Dance? How should a particular subclass's rules be adjudicated in particular situations? What do you do when your friend Scott is being an absolute fuckhead at the table, but you can't really say anything about it because he's marrying your sister next week and tensions between you and your family are bad enough as it is? Every weird niche nerd subculture needs its hero, and tonight, I am that hero. So come with me as I bring hope to the hopeless, insight to the insightless, as I go through and help to adjudicate Dungeons & Dragons table disputes I find on reddit.gov.biz. I feel like I look like if Gortash from Baldur's Gate 3 had like a gay cousin that worked in advertising. This first tale comes to us from Reddit user FrostIffer, who I'm choosing to believe that's how their username is pronounced, because otherwise it would be Frostiffer. And their post in question is titled, "Did I handle this wrong?" Well, why don't we find out? Ugh. So I ran a one-shot for my group a few weeks ago. I'm normally a player in this group, but I wanted to stretch my DM muscles a bit. I helped everyone build characters, and off we went. The session started off great. A bunch of role-playing, laughs, and fun for everyone. For now. After a while, we hit our first encounter, and that's where things got a bit less fun. Oh, there it is. A small argument broke out almost immediately as one of the players, who's also a fellow DM, started telling another player what they should do. I jumped in and said, let them take their turn how they want. This went back and forth for a bit, with the former DM trying to justify the move as being the best way for the party to move forward, and that it was just advice. But they were overruled by me and a couple of other players. What followed was a gradual decline in the former DM's involvement in the game. We had about 3 different encounters total, and by the last one I had to call his name up a half dozen times just to get him to take his turn. During the game, I chalked it up to being late, or boredom, but I could tell something was up. Today, I got a message from them, explaining that they felt put out that I shut them down, when that was the whole basis for their character, and they didn't have a whole lot of fun after that. I haven't responded yet as I'm trying to decide how to, but I wanted to gauge people's reactions and see what everyone else's thoughts are. I like how this DM put in parentheses that they stated their player might have been bored at the table. I find that's a very healthy thing for Dungeon Masters to do. Like, if you know in your heart of hearts that your players can be unenriched or be having a bad time at the table, like that really pushes you to try and, move them in the right direction to having fun and being engaged. You're not just assuming that they're hanging off your every word where you basically read a fantasy book you wrote to them. So there's a couple of things in this story that I think I want to pick out in particular. First off, DM player telling another player what they should do. Absolutely fucking not. Dungeons & Dragons is, at its very core essence, a game of cause and effect, right? You, as a player, say you do something, or you incite some mechanical feature that does a specific thing as determined by the rules. You do something, and then the world, as determined by the Dungeon Master, reacts to that. You roll an attack roll to hit something. If armor class beat equal yes, you do X amount of damage. You use X spell slot to cast X spell, and X thing happens. And because that happens, the world around you reacts to you doing that. Whether that's your entire pirate ship floats up into the sky because you cast reverse gravity, or your simple firebolt cantrip that you do to delight tavern goers eventually ends up burning the fucking place down, it's fucking like Asimov's law. For every action, there's a thing that happens afterwards. Right? Like, the choices you make are the whole point of the game. You are the adventurer. You are, doing the daring do and going on these wild adventures. You are making choices every step of the way, and those choices have direct consequences. But they are fundamentally your choices. The player going on to justify this as it being the best way to move forward is like, come on. Like, unless you are the Dungeon Master, which by the sounds of things, they have some experience being, Like, unless you are the dungeon master, you don't know what the best path forward is. Like, that's the whole point of the game. Like, that's just what it's like to be in the player chair. Like, sure, maybe casting a 7th level Disintegrate is the easiest way to move past the, 2 guards who are blocking access to the city, but that might have consequences. There is such a level of freedom in Dungeons & Dragons as you're playing. Like, the fact that you can do, like, pretty much anything that you say is wild. Like, that's why we love the game. But that is also a feeling that everybody on the table has. You have the absolute freedom to make any choice that you could possibly want. And so does everyone else. That's how it works. Like, the most you can do as a player at the table is offer your opinion on what you think people should do or how you think the best path forward in the adventure would be. Or, and perhaps more preferably, offer the insight of your character on what they think that the party should do to move forward. I tend to find that when I'm in these situations as a player, I like to ask myself, like, what would my character think? Because I feel like as a character, you have a lot more leeway to push back, you know? Like if I, Ethan, your very best friend, comes to you and says like, hey, I think we should do this, then, you're sort of bound by the social contract of being my absolute best friend to take my words as guidance. Because we built the rapport that we have, my messaging goes into your brain and is like, you can't not see that as some immutable truth of the world. That's just how Ethan works. But if Bombeldo the Garden Gnome turned level 3 Ranger says, hey, this is what I think we should do in this particular situation, you're more likely to say, hey, you, Bombeldo, you suck and aren't real. And then I, as Bombeldo, also have the leeway then to go, hey, you, fucker, you fucking dick ass shit balls ass fucking you son of a bitch who's like crawling out of a marsh, fucking your mother, and between you. And it's really funny because it's a garden gnome saying that, And I think that also helps you not take things too personally, Like, I have definitely given bad advice to players at the table of what I think, people should do or what I think the party should do moving forward. And like, if it's something that I propose and it turns out to be wrong or bad, then like, yeah, it sucks. It feels bad. But again, if Bombeldo does it, you can all laugh at him later. And that's great. And that also helps you take things a little less personally. Like, I can understand, feeling as though your words or like your guidance is being overlooked at the table sort of thing. Especially if you're used to being in the big DM's chair where like your word is law. Like, that makes you feel as though, you know what's going on. And that makes you feel as though your ideas are good because you have so much experience with your ideas being the literal law of the universe. It doesn't make it any less of a dick move, but it's a mentality that I understand. Also, the fact that this player just totally checked out after being told, hey, maybe let the other person at the table have some autonomy over the choices that they make. Really, man? Like, I know everybody is trying to have fun, but that also means that everybody is trying to have fun. Not just you. They were also overruled by the Dungeon Master and a couple of other players. And like, in that case, I feel like they probably should have read the room. So if I was the Dungeon Master who was running this game, I would probably... knowing me, I would probably apologize for making them feel like they weren't having a good time, even though it was entirely justified. I don't like feeling as though people are upset at me. But I would also probably just reiterate that like, hey, you were telling somebody else how to play their character. And like, just because that's what your player character would do, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know what the other player characters would do. So yeah, Dungeon Master, as in Dungeon Master running the game, not Dungeon Master who's playing in this one, who's a player but also a Dungeon Master sometimes. You did good. You're in the right. I love it when a story can just be summed up with, yes. I don't know if it's in my best interest to mention this, but like, anytime the composition of my curtain background changes, it's like, it's because I've pissed. Like, this is literally like stuck in the crevices of my bedroom door, and in order for me to leave this room, I have to completely demolish my setup, and then put it all back up again. And the only reason I need to do that is if I need to take a big piss. So that's what happens, and now you know about it. So, this next post is from Fenrir the Wolf 65, which is a bit of a redundant name, I think, but let's see what they have to say. My DM is fudging enemy health. What do I do? So here's the situation. My cousin, whom I am very close with, is the DM of a group that I am a player in. The group also consists of my brother and 3 friends. My DM has never liked losing and can be a poor sport. I may have built a fairly powerful martial character, in that I have an Aarakocra Ranger with Sharpshooter, 19 Dex, Braces of Archery, and a +1 bow that can give me haste once per day. It's a good build, but not as effective as our Paladin, who's even more loaded. Of course they are. They're a Paladin. We're running Descent into Avernus, but he's homebrewed the crap out of it, and that part's great. What's not great is that my DM has started tweaking the damage. I happen to work with numbers, and specifically spotting inconsistencies. I noticed something seemed off, so I started writing down the group's damage numbers, and I realized he's not counting all my damage, or he's adding health to targets I shoot at. In our last 2 encounters, it's becoming really obvious with some of the same enemy types having as many as 43 extra hit points, depending on if I target the enemy or not. In our last encounter, there were 6 Yugoloth minions who took respectively 63, 79, 79, 91, 92, and 106 points of damage. You can guess which 3 I shot at. I've talked to my brother and we're torn on what to do. Have not talked to the DM or the other 3 friends yet, just looking for advice. The thing that I want to know is, like, I get you can build an Aarakocra Ranger with, sharpshooters and a high dexterity, but how do you get the Braces of Archery and a +1 bow that can give you haste once per day? Like that feels like very specific loot. Like, did you ask for that? Did you give that to yourself before you started the game? Be honest. No matter what the situation at a table, like, it can feel pretty rubbish when you feel like you're being singled out by the Dungeon Master. For whatever reason. Like, maybe you're in a town and all the NPCs just fucking despise you for no reason. Or maybe in fights, all of you there... God. Or maybe in fights, all of the enemies target you for some reason. Or perhaps you get into situations like this, where it just feels like you're not doing enough damage. That being said, as a Dungeon Master, one of your primary tasks is to balance the game. And a big part of balancing a game of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is balancing it over the 3 to 6 schmucks who are sitting around the table with you. And for very combat-focused campaigns, like Descent into Avernus can be, sometimes that means you need to tweak fights or encounters around the people on your table. I'll give you an example from my own personal vault of experience. I had to run a campaign once, where some of the party members included a bard who was a pacifist, who actively would not fight anyone under any circumstances. Another member of the party was a teen rogue who always wanted to, find the non-combative solution to any problems, but when they did get in fights, they could only attack once per turn. We had a monk and a warlock who could bring a little bit more damage into the fight if the need arose for it. And then we had a mystic. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever played with a Mystic before. The Mystic was an Unearthed Arcana beta class that Wizards of the Coast was trying to, test out before official release, and eventually they shelved the entire class. Because it was that busted. Also, if this player from my old home game is watching this, I love you. I love the character you played. It was a nightmare to balance, and I loved it all the more for it. Basically, I found that encounters in this particular campaign either became far too easy because they had one character in the party who could absolutely explode at a moment's notice and just deal tons of damage and just basically win everything all the time. But if I pushed encounters to be a little bit harder to balance them around this one character who could do a lot of damage when push came to shove, everybody else would die. Like, side note, Mystics weren't just good at killing things, they were also good at staying alive. And not being put under threat in any circumstance. I cannot stress how fucking wild mystics are. I think at like level 8, or whenever you get to like 5th level spell slots, a mystic can cast Revivify 2.5 times more often than a cleric of the same level without the use of material components. Like, they can just do that for free. Also, they had this wonderful little feature that if you stabbed them or hit them in basically any way possible, their blood could turn to acid. And that would be like 3d8 acid damage. No saving throw, mind you. Just, oh, I stabbed you? You stabbed me back twice as hard. Hellish Rebuke? Obsolete. The Cleric class? Obsolete. Like, there was no reason that you couldn't just get an entire party of mystics and just be better at everything than a party of normal people. Okay, I went into a bit of a fugue state there. What are we talking about? Sometimes when you build characters to be broken in very particular ways, the Dungeon Master has to work around that. So like, imagine this, if the Dungeon Master wasn't tweaking the health pools of these enemies to not immediately be killed from your character specifically, what are the other players gonna do? Like, so you're just gonna run in and kill everything? What are they gonna do? What do they bring to the table? Like, how are they gonna have fun during these fights if you just come in and clean shop and make them feel obsolete? Their player does make a point here that my DM has never liked losing and can be a poor sport. I don't know, like, that could be a part of it. Like I feel like there's some social dynamics here at play. Like, I feel as though what the DM is doing isn't necessarily bad or a crime in any way. Like, maybe the player is feeling a little bit more put out by the DM because of this social stuff, when in actuality, the DM is just trying to stop fights from immediately being over because one person comes in and cleans shop. Like, especially if they have a paladin who's also doing this, like, that reads to me as something that might need to be worked around. Just so the other players at the table can feel like they're also having the, you know, fantasy adventurer power trip that they should be having in hell. Descent into Avernus being the campaign they're playing, of course. I think there might be some other tactics the DM could choose here. If they're fighting a lot of characters at range, they could create encounters where cover is more of a feature that appears. Especially total cover, because I think Sharpshooter might allow you to get around 1/2 and 3/4 cover. Might be thinking of Crossbow Expert though. A lot of rules, a lot of things to do with bows. You could have creatures that turn invisible that you need to run perception checks to see, and if you're really far away from them, you might have disadvantage on those perception checks. Since they're in Aarakocra, you could have flying creatures, because, you know, sometimes you hear stories of Aarakocra Rangers who fly up into the sky and then can't get hit by fucking everything. So if they're getting rushed at by demons with wings, things that demons contextually have sometimes, like, that could be a way to target this player and, you know, instead of making the creatures more durable to them specifically, that way you're putting the player character under a little bit more threat, so their damage potential is a little bit, you know, it makes them more of a glass cannon. Multi-attack defense is also another good feature that I feel like really helps you balance around martial characters. Like, that at the very least stops the Aarakocra Ranger from putting all of their damage into like one specific enemy. Okay, first of all, multi-attack defense is based on a Ranger feature that gives creatures a higher armor class based on consecutive attacks. So like, your first attack against a creature, you know, hits a certain armor class, but if you make another attack against them, that armor class is increased by like 4 or something. And that helps you balance things around martial characters who get multiple attacks. So maybe, you know, the first attack is easier to hit, and then the second attack, their armor class bumps up, so it's like, okay, strategically, I need to now split my damage between other creatures if I want to be effective. And that allows other characters, maybe like sorcerers or wizards who, instead of getting multiple attacks, have one big spell per turn, like, that at least helps them feel like they're being useful. And that also helps them get a lot more last hits on creatures, which makes them think that they've dealt the killing blow, even though it's still a communal effort from the party altogether. So all in all, like, I understand maybe feeling a little bit put out by having creatures directly adjusted to, you know, you as a character individually, but dungeon masters also need to find good workarounds to balance their campaigns when you have people or particular players in the party who are just more competent in certain situations. Like, especially in combat, like, you can really build up a character to be an absolute beast in fights, but as soon as they talk to somebody, they shrivel up and cry, which is like me. Except I'm not good at fights, I'm good at sending emails, I guess? God, what am I fucking good at? All in all, this player, in the right to feel a little bit put out, but also like, come on. Combat isn't everything. Like, give yourself some weird features. Like, instead of sharpshooter, take actor. Like, it's not gonna come up like 90% of the time, but the one time that it does, oh, buddy, it'll be worth it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. This next post comes to us from Reddit user HavoCfire713. Other players ruining my charisma rolls? ? I play a charisma-based characters. Weird plural, but alright. At the table I'm at, every single time I try to persuade an NPC, or deceive them, and roll really well, our barbarian or wizard jumps in and ruins it. Usually they say the opposite or contradict me somehow. The DM has the NPC react to the contradiction, and my persuasion fails. The barbarian tries to roleplay it as being too dumb to understand a lie, and the wizard says he isn't emotionally intelligent enough to understand not just presenting facts. To me, this is the same as covering the wizard's eyes when he does an investigation check, or prying the barbarian's hand off something when they try to do a strength check. I basically can't do any improvised persuasion or deception without them saying or doing something that ruins even a roll over 20. What can I do? I'm newer to the table and nervous to bring this up, as they all know each other very well, and I feel like they will not receive this info well. It just makes me feel like my character has no abilities or influence on the game. I'm okay with them doing it when my roll fails, but when I get a 24 on a convincing deal and they jump in, it ruins the fun for me. Okay, my big thing is that everybody should be having fun at the table, right? Some people want to have a power fantasy, some people want to roleplay a specific kind of character, and if two people's idea of the best way to have that fun, like, clashes or doesn't align, like, that's always a problem, and that needs to be addressed. I will say, though, this is so fucking funny, man. I would absolutely love to be this character who just has, like, this high charisma because they're a bard or, like, a sorcerer or a warlock or whatever, and just absolutely get clowned on at every chance they could possibly get. Like, if I'm the butt of the joke in real life, awful. Social anxiety, like, fucking, it feels the worst. But when I am the fucking dunked upon clown in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, that is where I thrive. Like, I would kill to be in this guy's shoes. Like, the fact that he's getting clowned on by the wizard and the barbarian at the same time, like, that's both sides of the intelligence spectrum just absolutely memeing on you. And like, yes! Okay, but that being said, I'm not this guy. He's not having a good time. That makes it a problem. Okay, yes, if the way other people are having fun at the table is clashing with the way you have fun at the table, especially if the way they are having fun is at your expense, like, that's an issue. And like, I think those kinds of things should be addressed at the table, and you should be able to say those things. D&D is a collaborative game. You're playing it with the people at the table. You're playing it with your friends. Or in this case, playing it with a bunch of people who are already friends. And that just makes you a friend to be, quite frankly. Like, I think if I was in this player's shoes and felt the same way that they did, like, I would definitely bring this up. But the crux of this issue is somebody being the butt of a joke that doesn't want to be the butt of a joke. And like, no matter what situation you're in, even in just life outside of Dungeons and Dragons, like, if you're not comfortable with the way that people are, you know, making jokes with or about you, like, that's a totally valid way to feel. Like, this to me is no different to having a schoolyard nickname that you do not like. Like, yes, I know, in the 3rd grade I spilled a chocolate pudding cup down the front of my pants and everybody saw it and we all had a good laugh. I don't want to be called shit dick anymore. I know it looks like I shit out my dick. It was funny for a week, okay? I'm 29 years old now. Like, I think this can be smoothed out pretty easily. Like, look, guys, it was funny. Like, we all had a good laugh. Like, ha 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 ha. I'm not a fan of this joke anymore. And I don't want to do it. Like, at this point, I feel like the joke is directly at my expense, and I'm not having a good time with it anymore. It was funny at the start, like, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, did 2.5 Men need 13 seasons? I don't think so. Like, I feel like this is also an issue that can also be solved in character as well. Like, the persuasive character is about to close a big deal, and he's like, one moment, my business companion. You two, wizard, barbarian, come here for a second. Please, for the love of God, don't fuck this up for me. This is the closest I have ever been to having a mental breakdown, okay? I am hanging on by a fucking thread, and I need this to go well, okay? You, barbarian, just sit there, say nothing. Just give a big, toothy smile, and just don't say a single word, okay? You, wizard, smile, nod, and say, he's right. Like, you're smart. He'll believe that. And that's all I need you to do. That's all I need you to say, okay? Just, please. I am at my wit's end. And I am standing over an abyss I don't think I can come back from. Please. And if they still fuck you over after that, just have your character jump in a lake and then remove all of their contact information from your phone. Going no contact is an acceptable resolution to your life's problems. My hand looks like it's edited in when I do that. Like, what the fuck is happening? But anyway, enough about my opinion on these matters. That doesn't count for shit. What do you think about these 3 scenarios that I've put forth here on youtube.com this fine day? Do you agree with my judgments? Do you find issues with my solutions? Tell me, if you were in these positions I've put forth, what would you personally do? And no, you can't just use Fireball. Like, that can't be your answer to every problem. Like, there's more things you can do in Dungeons & Dragons. You don't just have to annihilate everything. Please. So anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you really feel like you want to terrorize your Dungeon Master, go look up the Mystic class. Be like, hey, I found this work-in-progress class that Wizards of the Coast is testing out. Can I use this in my next game? It's technically built by the Dungeons & Dragons company, so that way you know it's going to be at least a little bit balanced. And then show them the true meaning of hell. After liking and subscribing, of course. Like, that's the #1 takeaway here. Yeah.